Hello again everyone and welcome back to Skyblock News. Today we're going to be going over a major alpha that changes how healing and combat is handled in Hypixel Skyblock, as well as a brand new early game account security quest. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe. Use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order, and without any further ado, let's get started. Starting off today, we have the account security quest, which begins by going over to Susan in the back part of the community center, where you volunteer for the safety squad. Now, this is a relatively long early game quest meant to teach you about account security, how not to lose your Minecraft account. It's pretty solid, I've got to say. I enjoyed the jokes throughout it, but it is a relatively long quest with a nice reward of a pretty decent early game talisman. It's a common talisman, as well as a booster cookie. Aside from the early game account security quest, which I think a lot of people will like and is a solid improvement to the game, the more important part of this update is all of the changes with healing and how healing now functions in Hypixel Skyblock. But if you want to test anything associated with this system, you need to go to Centauri and pick up the Resistance Sundial. A lot of the values on the Alpha Network for mob damage have not been tweaked yet, as the team are focusing more on the systems themselves rather than the actual individual damage numbers. You need this item in order to tweak your damage reduction values in order to test properly. The goal would be for you to pick up this item, you left click to reduce the amount of damage you take by increasing your damage reduction, and you right click by reducing that value. You want to do content on the alpha with this value set at whatever you believe is best to make it get pretty close to the main server. Obviously, you don't want a mob to immediately blow your head off and completely ruin your ability to actually play the game. So interact with content on the Alpha Network with this item enabled and with a damage reduction value that you find to be solid. So far, I've heard for Blaze anywhere between 10 and 15% work solidly. Same thing for E-Man, and I don't know the exact values for other pieces of content, but experiment with this item and leave those values that you've experimented with on the forums. It's what the team will utilize in order to figure out the new damage values for many of the mobs. Heading over to the forums, the team writes, "Hello, today we'll be mainly testing the healing revamp on the alpha. This update revamps healing in Skyblock and adjusts items that boost survivability, damage reduction, defense, and damage negation. There's a lot to unpack here, so please read the thread carefully and experience the changes on the Alpha Network before providing any feedback." They also note some stuff about the security quest. We already went over that in-game, so let's move on. They note that they're looking for feedback regarding the following for the healing revamp. How do you feel about Vitality as a resource? Are there certain areas of the game that became much easier or harder due to these changes? And should there be a general reduction to mob damage? Note, once again, there is the Resistance Sundial item. You need to use this in your testing if you want to come to good conclusions about this update. Obviously, if you're not going to use this, it's going to feel like the game got a whole lot harder. That is not the goal from the team. The goal is for things to be different, but not necessarily harder or easier. Please make note of that and use the Resistance Sundial and test based on the sundial. Set it to 10 or 15% as a baseline and go up and down from there. The team also provides some notes here as to what they would like to see when you provide your feedback. Notably, they want to see the context, what game stage, gear, and stats are you working with, the difficulty, how difficult is content after the changes, the damage adjustment, have certain mobs become harder to defeat with this change, and also, you can adjust your damage resistance with the Resistance Sundial, and yes, they are looking to nerf mob damage. So, for example, if you are struggling with a piece of content, it's not that the update is bad, they are planning on reducing mob damage. Just set your Resistance Sundial to a higher value and test based on that. And the experience, how does the gameplay experience feel as a whole? They plan on reducing the general amount of damage mobs deal based on the feedback. They anticipate that different groups of mobs will require different nerfs to their damage. The current hypothesis is that early game mobs need minimal changes, while later game mobs may potentially need bigger damage reductions. Kudra is expected to have mob damage nerfs, but those have not been implemented yet. Do not hesitate to ask questions about mechanics, changes, and the design of the update as a whole. They're looking forward to our questions. Moving on to the general information about this update, the healing revamp is not a content update, but rather a required step towards a combat revamp that allows the team to better produce combat content. This update does not intend to drastically affect the difficulty of existing combat content. Healing in Skyblock has become troublesome to deal with in terms of design, and these problems have affected gameplay negatively. To summarize, they currently cannot control a player's access to healing. The more healing there is, the more damage mobs need to do to be a threat, and everything turns into a glass cannon fight, where you either one-shot enemies, or you get one-shot. The solution to this issue is to control access to healing. They took the approach of introducing a new resource stat in Vitality, just like mana, for general abilities. You're familiar with how mana works. The amount of mana you have available controls which abilities you can feasibly use without running out of mana. There can be more powerful abilities that come with a higher mana cost. Having more mana is always better for the player. All of the aforementioned things apply to Vitality as a resource stat. Vitality is mana that is only used for healing abilities. The more vitality you have, the more frequently you can activate healing abilities, and gives you access to stronger healing abilities. The main goal of this update is to allow future combat design not to require immense damage values to kill a player. It allows the team to develop longer combat experiences where your HP matters. Read on for further explanation as to why this update is needed and what it brings to the table. The team also goes over a major explanation as to why they believe that healing in Skyblock is not good. The main reasons are, currently it's way too powerful, Vitality is a healing multiplier, items can double healing, there's no limit on the number of healing abilities used, and all you need to heal is mana and an inventory slot. Basically, this leads to damage not sticking to players in Skyblock. It can be healed back extremely quickly. Even if you're knocked down to 1% health, you can heal back so fast that you can have full HP again before the next attack lands. And this also makes it so there's no design space for new healing effects in the game. Because it only costs a pitiful amount of spare mana to heal, every new healing item is free healing. Adding free healing is not sustainable forever, and adding stronger percentage healing items is also not sustainable. And they go into further detail about this here, where they just talk about the same ideas, but going over it in a more detailed manner. The team continues by stating content that is currently in the game is designed around the availability of healing in Skyblock. It is technically possible to design around these issues, but the resulting gameplay involving insta-kills is not a fun gameplay loop. We want to avoid these in future gameplay. We have devised a solution to the above issue in the form of Vitality as a resource. Continuing on, how does Vitality as a resource work? Vitality no longer boosts healing as a multiplier. Having more Vitality still increases the amount of healing you have, just in a different way. The more Vitality you have, the more frequently you can activate healing items. Players have a base Vitality stat of 100. The more Vitality you have from various sources, the more Vitality you will have available. In other words, Vitality is still a stat that you want to build if you want to heal more. Vitality is now a resource akin to mana. Your Vitality stat defines the maximum amount of Vitality, the resource, that you have. Activating abilities that cost Vitality deplete the resource, and the depleted Vitality will regenerate every second. Vitality will regenerate at a rate of 5% per second based on your Vitality stat. So if you have 100 Vitality, you gain 5 per second, and if you have 200, you gain 10 per second. Vitality replaces mana in your action bar when holding an item that consumes Vitality. I hope this is easy to understand. It's basically just turning Vitality into the equivalent of mana, but for healing items. So what do these changes accomplish? The team will no longer need to resort to high damage values to make damage stick onto players. With lower damage numbers, content will now be more accessible to players throughout the progression. Percent max HP based true damage can be phased out in favor of regular, flat number damage. This no longer makes it disadvantageous to have higher amounts of EHP. They can now effectively control how much healing a player has by limiting the amount of Vitality that you have. There is no longer an advantage for having 6 healing items just to bypass individual item cooldowns. They can introduce stronger healing items without worrying that it becomes too much healing, and Mage no longer has an inherent advantage in healing availability due to Mage preferring to stack mana. In terms of the content that this affects, the main points here are that they don't want current content to be more difficult than before, and here's the content that may be more affected by the changes. Dungeons, Blaze Slayer, other Slayers, the Campfire Trials, and general combat gameplay. So make sure you're testing this stuff more often during the testing period of this alpha, and utilize the damage reduction as you see fit to find the values that make the most sense for these pieces of content. They want to do this to make combat content better in the future, with longer fights and your health actually mattering. This is just the process that gets us to that point. In terms of some other important changes, passive health regeneration is now doubled outside of combat. The definition of being in combat is slightly tweaked. If you defeat whatever is aggroed onto you, you are now out of combat. And healing in dungeons is now multiplied by your dungeon's stat boost. We also have an absolutely massive list of changes. I'm not going to go over everything here because frankly there is just so much to go over, from accessories to accessory powers to potions to other changes to dragons to Blaze Slayer. Pretty much everything in the game has been changed to account for these changes. I highly recommend hopping on the alpha over the next couple days to experiment and test out a lot of these things. For now, though, I'm going to go over the relevant healing sources here, stuff like the zombie sword. And as you can see, the biggest changes are that they removed a lot of the percent HP bonuses and turned it into flat values. Also, all variants of the zombie swords now cost 25 vitality to cast, which once again is now equivalent to mana, but for healing items. Also note that zombie swords will now heal for 20% of health gained by you to all allies nearby as follows. And as you can see, it goes from 64 HP for the regular zombie sword up to 100 for the florid. Moving on to healing wands, all variants of healing wands now cost 25 vitality to cast, and the healing has been adjusted. Basically some nerfs across the board. Notably, the length has been reduced from 7 seconds down to 5 for the first two, and then 6 for the next two. And the amount of healing has also been reduced. The Wand of Atonement now only heals 120 HP per second for 6 seconds, down from 170 HP per second for 7 seconds, so some nerfs there. Power Orbs got some big changes here. They retain the 50% of max mana cost to cast, and gain an additional cost of 50 vitality to cast. The original flat HP on Power Orbs has been separated into two parts, health regen and flat healing, and instead of the original percentage heal for X percent HP per second, each Power Orb now grants some health regen, the stat, as follows, going from 25 all the way up to 125 for the Plasma Flux. They also give some flat HP per second, going from 25 up to 50. There are two more changes to Power Orbs. The HP per second healing provided to teammates is halved, and they no longer give Vitality and Mending. The TLDR in their view is that basically Power Orbs were a little strong as it is, and in the new system they wanted to separate out the healing in order to retain some limited percentage healing from the Power Orbs with the health regen, but also controlling the amount of healing it gives you with the flat healing values. Also, they state if you want to give a lot of your teammates a huge amount of healing, you would need to focus on mending a little bit more. It makes that more of a meta option. The alternative to this is to have Power Orbs no longer heal teammates outright, which would not be fun at all. And they also state the alternative would just be making it the normal amount, which would make it so that healing and multiplayer content becomes trivial. They're kind of trying to keep a balance here. I think this is a decent job, but if they, for example, find that in the future, Power Orbs are too weak, they could always improve them in the future. And also they state they will design future Power Orbs potentially that center more around those stats, as in Vitality and Mending. So maybe we can get a Mending Power Orb in the future, which would be kind of interesting to see. Flares also keep their respective mana costs to cast and gain an additional cost of 10 Vitality to cast. The activation cost does not increase when you upgrade your Flare. And as you can see, they changed around the Vitality a little bit for the Flares. The SOS Flare now only gives 25 Vitality, down from 30. The True Defense, though, has been buffed. The SOS Flare now grants you 30 True Defense, and they also grant a flat amount of HP per second while on the Crimson Isle and in Kudra's Lair, allowing players to get passive healing without needing to use a Power Orb, going up to 40 HP per second for the SOS Flare. Pretty solid, I've got to say. I don't think this is as big of a change as it was for the Power Orbs. I think this is fine. Wither Shield got some big changes, notably to how its absorption is calculated. And as you can see, the absorption scales up with your Catacombs level. So at Cata 25, you get 1k total absorption, at Cata 50, you get 1400, and in the middle, you get a different conversion rate. The higher your conversion rate, the more healing you get per vitality consumed. In this case, the higher your Cata level, the more absorption you get out of the shield. Also, activating Wither Shield now costs 50 vitality. Not having enough vitality does not prevent you from casting Wither Impact, by the way. It will still deal damage, it just doesn't put up the shield. It also retains 10% damage reduction while the ability is active, and it will no longer heal the player when it expires. Instead of the healing, a vitality refund is given based on how much of the shield is used, wasting no vitality. So, if you put up the shield and you take no damage, you should get all of the vitality back and you can just instantly cast it again. If you burn through the whole thing, you get no vitality back. Very sad, but you understand the idea here. The goal is to make it more of a thing that you have to actively think about while you're playing any sort of content. You'll have to actually use your vitality in a manner that makes sense. You won't be able to just spam it on trash mobs if you're fighting a stronger mob, which is kind of the goal of the future content that they're eventually going to design. You know, maybe there will be a bunch of trash mobs. Oh, I don't want to use my healing here, I'll use something else. And then you can, then waste all of your healing, or vitality rather, on the big, strong mob. The Withercloak sword got a few changes as well. It now spawns a layered veil that negates damage as follows. You lose a layer on hit, consuming 30 vitality and blocking up to 1000 damage. The damage blocked scales with your Catacombs stat bonus, and when the damage exceeds a layer's limit, another layer is consumed until all damage is accounted for. If you don't have enough vitality for another block, consume all remaining vitality and take slight knockback. You can't attack or regenerate vitality while the veil is up. Its cooldown is unchanged. As part of this update, pretty much every enchantment related to healing has been changed out significantly. Note, it seems like Drain is just absolutely terrible right now on the Alpha Network. I've heard from a few people that may be buffed in the future, but as you can see, the rest of the enchants have been changed around as well, giving you health regen, giving you some amount of HP every time you kill a mob, and giving you some amount of HP every time you hit a mob. Overall, the changes aren't bad, it's just going to be a little bit of testing to figure out what is good and what is not very good. Refrigerate also got a few changes here. The defense from Refrigerate now increases with the amount of armor pieces. The maximum defense gain is reduced from 1000 down to 600, and the amount of mana required to sustain the defense boost is higher. Last Stand also got a few notable changes. It now activates a buff when you reach below 40% HP, instead of being active only when staying under the threshold. The defense buff lasts 10 seconds with a 30-second cooldown, meaning the ability has a 20-second downtime. The mana enchantments, like Hardened Mana, Strong Mana, Ferocious Mana, and Vampiric Mana, have been reworked to use Vitality instead. The bonuses from the enchantments now proc on your own vitality consumption, and the enchantments remain conflicting to one another, and can be used on multiple armor pieces at once. So you can now use these enchants to boost your strength, your defense, your bonus attack speed, and your healing as well, which is pretty solid, I've got to say. I think this is actually going to be kind of interesting for these enchantments. I don't know how much worse or better they will be. They might need to be tweaked a little bit, I've got to say. Mastiff and Pooch have been changed around a little bit. Notably, Mastiff armor now no longer gives you a massive HP boost. The defense reduction per Mastiff armor piece is now negative 30. The health per armor piece has been adjusted as follows. The helmet gives you 300, the chestplate gives you 500, the leggings give you 400, and the boots give you 200. The existing HP to damage conversion has been removed and replaced with the following. You gain 1% HP for every 25 crit damage with a maximum of 40% HP. The crit damage nerf on Mastiff is reduced from 50% down to 30%, and healing with Mastiff armor set bonus now consumes vitality. The Pooch sword has also been adjusted to be more in line with the other Slayer weapons. The base damage is now 160. You gain 10 weapon damage per Wolf Slayer level. You gain plus 75% damage against wolves. The above bonuses are doubled while wearing a full set of Mastiff or Pack armor, and the strength bonus from the weapon's passive has been removed. Kind of interesting there for the Pooch Sword. I wonder if that means we'll eventually get a tier 5 Sven. Really hope we do. But I think the Pooch Sword will be better specifically against wolves, although obviously the massive reduction in Mastiff Armor's utility is something to note and take away from this. In my view, it was getting a little bit out of hand. They probably needed to make changes to Mastiff. It was super crazy on early game Iron Man. You could just blitz through a ton of content. Once you had access to Mastiff and a ton of crit damage, you were just a ridiculous tanky monster, and that is no longer the case. There is also a bunch of other changes to weapons and pets and so many other items, like Gloomlock Grimoire, for example, got changed to now just give you 1000 HP rather than 40% max HP for 60 vitality on no cooldown, so on and so forth. The Lesser Orb of Healing got changed to give you health regen and a reduced amount of mana drain, and also drain some amount of vitality, with a duration limit of 60 seconds. I can go on and on. There are so many major changes here. But if I were to go over every single one of these individually, this video would probably be close to an hour long. So I'm going to let you guys go through here and try to figure out everything related to these changes, especially considering that many of them may get changed in the near future as well. Something I will cover here, though, is that Blaze Slayer got a few changes. Its percent true damage has been replaced with flat true damage as follows. So tier 1 through 4, as you can see, now have flat true damage values. So a tier 4 in phase 1 deals 600 flat true damage a second, then 900 in phase 2, and then 1500 in phase 3, with the fire pits dealing triple phase 3 damage instead of 200% HP. Colliding with Quasi's Rafflecopter now deals 2000 true damage, and stepping into the fire trail deals 1800 true damage instead of 60% HP. Obviously, a lot of the changes that we've gone over today are extremely fundamental to the game's design as a whole, and I also understand it's absolutely scary to see changes like this going into effect on the Alpha Network, where players are worried that it will be released exactly like this. I promise you, it will not. The team is using the alpha as a place to gather early feedback about what parts of the game need more tweaking under the new system. I highly recommend that you hop on, get the damage reduction item, and test to your heart's content. Do bosses, do bosses, do bosses, over and over again until you find the damage reduction values that work for you, and report them to the team. That way, the damage reduction can be actually put into place on the bosses, and we have a better experience for all players, because the goal here is not to make the game harder, not to make the game more convoluted, but rather set up for a future where we get more combat content more often. And I think that's a future that pretty much everybody wants at this point. Wrapping up here, sorry that I don't have more specific testing numbers for all of the different bosses. It's not really something I'm going to be able to do in an easy manner, especially considering that many of them will be changed in the near future. In terms of the big picture idea of this update, I think things look good, but obviously many of the individual damage numbers right now are broken beyond belief and need additional tuning by the team. So if you're somebody who's good at a certain Slayer, or want to practice your dungeon runs even, now is a good time to sandbox, I've got to say. Hop in, get your items together, get a little team together, and load up into a dungeon and see what numbers work and which numbers don't, because that feedback will shape how this update releases to main. Would love to hear all of your thoughts about this update, as well as the new account security quest, although I've got to say, that is a pretty cute quest, and I think they did a good job of it. And look to the future, fellas. I'll see you then.